Good morning. Good morning, all. This is August the 4th, 2019. This is our Genie seminar. Welcome, everyone. I make our usual announcement that this is being recorded. So by participating, you are also giving permission and aware that anything you say can be recorded and may be used in the future, because we're hoping that this new method of education, what we're calling Genie seminars, would be available on a wide-scale basis. That one of our hopes is that we can make this type of new form of education where people share their genius together instead of simply listen to talking heads, and get some skin in the game and learn more rapidly. That we hope to make this more widespread. And of course, we're all aware that we, in a meeting with the Director of Education of Zoom, they've authorized us to have 50 links to help spread this, and they even offer to do us more. So that was a wonderful opportunity. And I also am happy to announce that Sherrod has come up with a brilliant idea here. He has created a system now that when we're online now, we are actually live streaming, so that anyone, anywhere in the world actually, when they have our link, which we can provide them, will be able to listen in to our meeting if they choose to. They can also use the chat box if they want to start a conversation about anything that we're saying or doing on the sidebar. So it really opens up our meeting not just to a recording that people can listen to in the future, but it also makes it available to anyone who we would like to give the link to. And if this meeting does become popular, we're able to be successful, then and spreading what we're saying is Einstein's relatively neglected method of creating a better world. He said we have to teach ourselves a newer way of thinking, where we cooperate with one another instead of our present way of thinking, where we generally compete with one another, as we've done in the past. Our history has been our history through evolution earlier is that we had to compete with one another for so-called fight or flight. We didn't have the ability to communicate, so we're engaged in fight or flight, and that was appropriate and effective then. But in today's world, we recognize when we have such powerful weapons that it's no longer appropriate. Just imagine, for example, what the world would be like if instead of having teeth, let's say our predator species, let's say sharks, eagles, and lions, instead of having teeth, they were all equipped with a nuclear weapon. What would our world be like? Or we probably wouldn't have a world. It's pretty obvious. Again, think what it would be like if when our settlers, our ancestors, came to the New World, if Indians had nuclear weapons and we had nuclear weapons, what would be the outcome of that? The present outcome is pretty clear. The Indians were equipped with bows and arrows, and the settlers were equipped with guns. And what happened is that a smaller number of people basically overcame a larger population because of the difference in weapons. And the situation we have now is, I don't know if we can say that was a successful thing, or we're rather ashamed of it, whatever way you want to look at it, that we've essentially we've stolen the lands of the people for a few beads. And the individuals now, the Indians we know, are living in rather limited circumstances. We've taken their lands because we had guns and they had bows and arrows. And now the world, as Einstein is telling, is what's different today than the previous world. Is what's different is, of course, that not only do we have weapons that have ultimate destructive power, what I call WUD, not weapons of mass destruction, but weapons with ultimate destructive power, that if now everybody, or at least 9 tribes, have these weapons, what will be the outcome. It's different than it was in World War II when we had the bomb and others did not. So the war ended pretty quickly. But the world is different, and we see now that we're in a situation where at least the experts are predicting, instead of dealing with one another by win-lose competition, we're engaged in a lose-lose situation. If somebody pushes the button, everybody loses. All, the way things work now is one rocket goes up in the air and it sends a message to hundreds of rockets in airplanes, in submarines, and in silos that are unleashed at one time. And then whoever has others in another country, when they have 2 or 3 minutes warning, they push their button, and then we've essentially created the end of civilization as we know it. So that's the situation we're in, and I thought that one of the topics we might consider today, because one of the hopes we have in this meeting is that we can use this as a newer method of education and spread it as AA was spread by 2 alcoholic men, to make this worldwide. But one of the topics I would like to address today, because it's so timely, we said that one of the benefits of Genie seminars, it provides us the ability to solve problems and solve current problems. And we've said the greatest problem we have today can be summarized in the statement, a question really, a puzzle. Why is it that we fill our world with fear, scarcity, hate, and war, when what we want and need is happiness, enough, love, and peace? We need help, and instead we've created a different kind of world. So that's what I'd asked you to address the topic today. We've had just recently, within the last number of hours, 2 mass killings in Texas, and I believe what's Ohio, is it? The second one, where we've had mass killings, and this is just a series of mass killings. So we asked ourselves the question is, why is it that we fill our world with fear, scarcity, hate, and war, when it's quite obviously not what we want? And we've also been told that events have histories. They leave a trail. So when we have an event, that if we have some idea of what, we better understand it if we look at the trail that happened before. And obviously there are certain things that happened before these mass killings, that sometime before we had machine guns and such weapons, we had bombs that kill a few people, and then before that we had bows and arrows, and before that we had sticks and stones, and before that we had teeth and muscles. So we've gone through a very rapid and dramatic change, and now Einstein saying we have a weapon that's so different. So I want to remind you that before not the last meeting, what we said, we spent the last meeting talking about our new website. We think we've created a website that is really good now and user-friendly, that we can use to attract people to come to our website. So we've spent the last probably couple of years actually refining our ability to create change, to create Einstein's solution. And now we have the ability to publicize it, but we don't have people to use it. People are more interested in staying in their comfort zone, which is, for the most people, it's making money and becoming famous and doing whatever needs to be done to get food on the table and so on. But it's not apparently solving the problem. How do we prevent filling our world with fear, scarcity, hate, and war? So, but the time before that, and I asked you to go through a little exercise, and I'll just use that to before I turn over the talking stick here. 2 meetings ago, before we talked about our website, which was to get up some feedback, we asked you to imagine that you were from an outer space, and you were given the assignment of coming to Earth and observing us for over a period of time to try to take back to your world, your planet, what people on Earth are like. What do we understand? And we asked if you could imagine, what would they say if they came and they saw a bus, a tractor, a Ferrari, and a bulldozer? Now, how would they describe that? And if you recall what most of your answers were, what you pointed out were the differences, how they differ from one another. And then as we discussed this for a little while, we began to get to the idea, well, is there something else behind this? And yes, my intent was to say, well, what if we could observe our history? We could understand something about the background. Then we realized that we all had come from, the trucks and all those came from a similar background. And then we began to focus on the similarities. They all had wheels, they all had seats, and they had a motor. And we began to realize that instead of focusing on our differences, we began to look at the similarities and realize the similarities were far greater than the differences. And I bring this up because we're doing this today, aren't we, when we look at people. When we look at tribes, people are much more alike than they are different. We have the same number of arms and legs. Our male and female brains are relatively similar. We have basically all our organs are pretty much the same. In fact, they're even interchangeable now. We exchange hearts, kidneys, and we're so similar. But the fact is that our way of thinking is we tend to be more focused on our differences. So I bring that up because what I'm suggesting to you is the reason we have the problem today, I'm introducing this, the reason we have the problem with guns today is because what Einstein told us is the way we tend to think that we're addicted to, that was been successful for billions, for our history, is that we recognize our differences. We recognize our differences by the language we use. So if we have words that fill our language with words like patriotic words and words that are political or religious, these words in our language focus on our differences. But if we understand that we're more similar, and we understand the different way of thinking, we would recognize our similarities and we would learn to cooperate for our benefit rather than compete for our differences. So I offer that as just an introduction. And now I'm going to turn the talking stick over to you and ask, do you have some ideas? And can we use our co-creative genius to ask the question, why is it now that we have fairly suddenly and fairly consistently mass shootings using machine guns, basically, using weapons. And I point out that it's virtually always a male. We've talked about the difference between our genders now, the male gender energy and female gender energy, but most of the shootings are done by males. And I'd also point out, before we turn over the talking stick, that Einstein told us this is not a new problem. You might agree, disagree, or agree with this, but Einstein told us this is not a new problem, that we've always, and throughout history, we've dealt with, we thought the way of thinking has been fight or flight. The difference is that we engage in fight or flight with teeth and muscles and sticks and stones and bows and arrows. What's different today is not that we're thinking any different, we're still thinking the same, but instead of having teeth and sticks and stones, we're fighting with machine guns. So when people engage in fight or flight, it's not a matter of a confrontation and both sides survive. Now we're in a confrontation presently with machine guns, but we're headed to a fight soon with weapons that destroy everything. So that's my background information, and I'm going to turn the talking stick and see if you can have some creative ideas. What do we do? Is there something we can do about the situation? Or we suck it with it? Is this just a forewarning? If we said that events have trails, if we look at our history and understand our history, so we can see that we've become more and more violent because using more dangerous weapons, And the next step would be when now countries get involved in fight or flight, it will be the end of everything. If the experts in the world tell us that we only have a limited amount of time to decide what we can do to prevent someone pushing the button. It won't be a machine gun this time, but it'll be the simple thing of either a deliberate act of pushing the button, a terrorist example, or perhaps even a mechanical error, because when you have all these weapons tied to already unleashed status, even a mechanical error could set off the button that releases that one rocket that sends a message to all the other ones, because that's the way they're all programmed. So thank you for allowing me that introduction, and it's your turn to share your genius. Are you showing us your cat's ass for a particular reason?
Well, I guess we may as well both show it then, and I'll pick up the talking feather to say, thank you, Don. I mean, when I listen to you speak, and I've just been a fan of you, I realize that you put so much thought into these conversations, and I love how you want to bring everyone in. But yes, my Callie seems to like my screen this morning, and I guess I'll just say that when I hear you speak like you do, Don, and we've had the new shootings, I just continuously hear that prayer. A weapon, howsoever powerful it may be, can always be superseded by a more powerful weapon. But there is no weapon more powerful than nonviolence and love. And when you speak about, everyone could be a loser in this game we play now, just as readily, everyone could be a winner. And so I hope that, I'm grateful that we're live streaming now and that other people can bring their questions and thoughts together and join us. And I'm going to return the talking stick, but since my cat opened up the conversation.
Thank you for your comment. And I think your cat was very intelligent in trying to give us a message, but figure out what that message is.
I was watching television this morning, and they were interviewing Rosa DeLauro, and she's somebody I really didn't know much about, but was impressed. Seen her recently, and the reporter they were talking about these shootings, and the interviewer said, "Do you think Donald Trump is a racist?" And she sort of talked around it, and she said, and didn't say yes he was or no he wasn't. And then the woman pressed again, or the man, I guess, and she said, I think that what he says breeds divisiveness, but I wouldn't use those words. And I was just thinking, she was put in a position trying to be, I guess, a moderate or tactful or something, and he kept on insisting that she say something, he's either this or he's that, and she wouldn't fall into that trap. And I think that's one of the reasons, the media wants people to come down on one side or the other, and if you start saying it, you start believing it, and I think that's one of the problems. You have to line up sides instead of saying, well, I see something positive in this, I might not like this, but won't let people look at it in a sort of a modulated way. And I think it's sort of relevant to the business of lining up on one side or the other, being pressured by society, by your friends, by the media to take a side rather than to opt for some sort of cooperative approach.
The issue, the tragedy, is that 29 innocent people are dead. The horrific thing on top of that is to sweep them aside and politicize it. It is horribly disingenuous to the tragedy and the suffering families. This is, This is the terrible downside of living in a free society, is that we've got 300 million people in this country. You don't know how many thousands of absolute lunatics and crackpots there are who are ready to blow sky high at any given moment. How many times has this happened? How many schools have been shot up? Texas is a hotbed for this sort of thing. We had the assault on the military base in Texas not terribly long ago. I could point out many of these scenes that happen in the country. I think the rush to politicizing it is terrible, and I don't say that in support of Trump, but I don't say that to condemn him either. I think it's absolutely beside the point. I mean, if the man is nuts, the man is nuts. Sorry for that psychiatric terminology there, Dr. Pat, but that's what's going on. And it's going to happen again. It's the downside of a free society. People start screaming about gun control as though that's going to have a direct impact on crazy people who access guns legally or illegally with the intent to harm. I think if I knew a way to stop that, to curtail that, to get out in advance of it and know what's going on mentally with people like that, I think I would win a Nobel Peace Prize. Enough said from me.
You know, what would be interesting to know is, like, has any of these people, you know, because it is not a new phenomenon, right? Especially here in America, we had the Unibomber, and then there are a lot of people who have done this earlier, probably in a different way. But now it seems for such people, gun is, especially an automatic or a semi-automatic rifle is a choice weapon nowadays, because it is easily accessible, and very easily you can go and do whatever you want with no thought about the repercussions. But it would be good to know if anyone is aware of what goes in the mind of these people. Um, Hate is a word that we use very often when describing such events like hate crime. But I am not able to realize, how can you hate someone if you don't even know them? In this case, what happened in Texas, I read that a 2-year-old child died. Now, how can you hate a 2-year-old child whom you have not even seen or not even met? So I don't understand. The problem is not as simple. I was talking to one of my friends about this, and he suggested that it is not the gun. It is the issue is not the gun, because gun was always there. The issue has come more recently in the past 10, 15, 20 years. It is more the way the society has changed, and the mindset has changed, that the problem has occurred. So just blaming the free access to gun or easy access to gun may be barking down the wrong tree. It has to be a more holistic approach towards when we are thinking about this.
Two important comments to that.
I would say,
go ahead,
sorry.
Go ahead.
All right. I do appreciate this song this morning, but I have to say, I think it is political, or we need to make it political. And we need to support our politicians that don't ignore it or say they're going to offer thoughts and prayers. We need more than that. They don't allow research, around gun violence. They've shut that down. We know this. And we do know that a lot of these young white males, who are mostly the people that commit these kinds of crime, have posted political positions and positions of hate. So I don't know if saying we're not going to make it, but they've made it political. The people who do this make it political, and our politicians' response to these events is what makes it political. So I think, whether we can apply the right or the wrong words, I think as a nation, what we need is to understand the issue better by not preventing the research, and that by not ignoring that we have a gun problem in this country. to say it's not the guns, I think is not accurate either. It is the guns. Countries that have stronger policies and address this head on don't have the gun violence that we have in this nation.
Well, you don't need guns. The Murrah building was destroyed by a bomb. The Boston Marathon was destroyed by a piece of cookware. Okay, if you're out to commit mayhem, the manner in which you do it doesn't rely on guns. You know, this is the argument comes down to this time and time again. To apply a couple of points to Shavat's thesis, why would you want to set out to kill a 2-year-old child? The answer is madness. There's no objective to kill a 2-year-old child. It goes back to what I said before. And it goes back to, let's take the Boston Marathon. I'll ask the same question. Did the Tsarnaevs set out to kill an 8-year-old child? I believe that they were both crazy. They were both mad. And so is the perpetrator for whatever reason. And when they post some sort of crazy manifesto in the social media, or they tweet it out or whatever, if you look at this stuff, it just illustrates my point further. Political objective, they're crazy. To wrap it all up in a political objective is just nuts. It doesn't make
No. Let's address some of what you said. Right. When you investigate it, when you look at it and you see, well, if the person who is buying a lot of fertilizer or the person who are buying certain amounts of chemicals, we need to watch that person, right? We need to pay attention to that person because they may be planning something. So they look for the cues. If we don't have even the right research applied to the way people are purchasing guns and who's purchasing guns and the kinds of limitations we need to put on the sale of certain guns, this is going to happen. Is what I'm saying is the response that we have when there's a bomb. They make the right kind of adjustments, and you don't see that happening a lot. We're not making the right kinds of adjustments when it comes to guns.
Well, to address some of what you just said, I agree with it, but all it's going to do is affect one component, one precinct of those who use guns, and those are legal gun users and buyers. You're not going to end. Gun control to stop this kind of violence is fallacious as an argument, because there are 300 million illegal guns on the loose in this country right now. There is no way in hell to vacuum them up. If you want a gun, you can get a gun, no matter how crazy you are. You can get one on any street corner in America.
Maybe that's the problem.
Well, it is, but what are you going to do about it? There's no way to...
We have to try. We're not doing anything, Brad. That's the point. By just saying, oh, you know, we can't politicize it and we can't do anything about it because they're crackpots and crackpots are going to kill people however they want, I think that's not the right approach either.
Well, no, it isn't the right approach. No, and I absolutely agree with you. That's an observation on my part. It's not the right approach. I'm saying in a free country, this is always going to happen. It always has. And I hate to say it, Josephine, but I think it always will. Take Chicago, for instance. Has the toughest gun control laws of any city in this nation and the highest degree of gun crime, because it's all being committed by criminals. And the laws, they don't give a damn about them, and you know, we're always after the fact in enforcing them. But I'm not arguing with you. I agree with you. I'm simply saying that you want to research it and take down any restrictions on researching it. God bless you. Go. You know, I would support that wholeheartedly.
But they haven't. But they haven't. Our politicians haven't. Is my point. They haven't done anything to address it other than saying thoughts and prayers. That is not a solution.
Oh, I think that new gun control laws are being imposed all the time. Back over the last.
Where?
Federally. If you look.
I don't know.
Well,
I don't think so. I'm gonna turn over the talking stick, Brad. We should take this offline. We'll do it on the business meeting. But
no, I think I've made my point, and I absolutely respect your view on this, Josephine. And if I didn't make it clear, I'm really very much in agreement with you on it.
Thank you.
I think that
My pleasure.
I think that gun control is part of it. Gun control is not going to solve the problem we're having, but it might control a certain percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Say it's 5% or 10%. So saying that if we have gun control, we're going to have a civil society again where people aren't going to shoot up shopping centers, I think is wrong. But you might prevent 1 or 2 people from going and shooting up a shopping center because you prevented that person from getting a gun, whether it's online or on the street corner or wherever. So it isn't just gun control. Gun control or no gun control. Let's attack a little piece at a time. That's a little piece that maybe we can do something about. The other piece, I think, has to do with people who hate other people, Sherrod talks about, and feel like they're going to go out and to make themselves and the world a better place, they're going to shoot up children, just like Sandy Hook. That you've got to get at from a different angle, and whether it seems to me it would be education, maybe working with young kids or identifying mental issues in young children and trying to address it. That might be another angle, but there's got to be a multi-pronged approach if we want to make a dent. And I don't think it's not going to be one size fits all.
Well, one direction that you can go in that I think might have some impact, it isn't necessarily the world that I want to live in, but from simply the pragmatic standpoint, is you set up and spend even more money than we spend now on surveillance in public places, in public areas, and you have, I guess, more, dogs that are trained to spot this, more technology that's trained to spot when people have guns in public places. It would come down to the point where you couldn't go into the corner Stop and Shop without passing through metal detectors. And as I say, it isn't the culture that I want to live in, but if you're asking what might prevent this, you're going to have an easier time detecting it than you are vacuuming up 300 million illegal guns. It's like saying, how do we stop people from buying and selling drugs? We've spent trillions of dollars on it for 50 years and we haven't made a dent. If you want them, you can get them.
One thing what happened 2 or 3 years ago in France, I don't know whether you guys recollect, is there was this crazy guy who simply hired a truck in the summer months and used that truck to kill 100 people. Similarly, a few years, I think 1 or 2 years later, there was this crazy guy with just a knife and a car. He went to the London Bridge somewhere and he hit a few people. Then he started running and stabbing everyone he found. So that is what I think, Brad, what you're bringing is the same thing. Anyone who has this severe hate in his heart for everyone, and there are people now, especially these young kids, they just want to be popular, notorious or popular, whatever you want to. They feel that their lives is so insignificant that even if at the cost of doing this costly act and at the cost of their own peril, because they will be killed either directly or later on in a court case, they just want to live that moment. You see that what happened in New Zealand. You have hate for someone, you kill them, but then that guy was live streaming. So we are now live streaming for something positive. That guy was live streaming for the most ghastly act that anyone could do. What was the purpose behind that? Because he wanted to be popular for that 1 hour. That is what it is. He wanted to be the topic in the world. And how many people were watching him live? Several.
Well, not everyone can be president and tweet it out and have that many followers, right? And we glorify certain types of behavior, which is vile. That's number one. But to be honest with you, us sitting here on the call talking about at least, why these people pick up the guns, I'm really, really not sure, because the information that we get from the press is only the information that they want to share. And I think the dialogue and the narrative is shaped by the information that they share. So until I really understand, I don't know if we can really have an answer. right? I really don't. I think we can just, as the voting populace, listen to what, our politicians are saying and decide who we want to vote for and the approach that they're going to take. I think that's, that's the position we're in as a general population, to be honest.
It was just yesterday, 3:30 in the afternoon. A guy tried to get on a plane at Bradley Airport in Hartford, our airport for Springfield, Hartford, with a loaded gun. So what does this tell us? It tells us that in this day and age, I'm going to say that you have to be out of your mind to carry a loaded gun into an airport and try to get on a plane with what we know and what we've been through in the last quarter century in America. But that's what he went to do. Point number one. Point number two is preventative measures in the airport worked. The system worked. He didn't get there. He's under arrest, the gun confiscated. So all you can do, in my opinion, is continue to beef up all the security that we have in this country. We live in a new age of security with a lot of freedoms being restricted as a result. To get to the behavior that's causal in doing this, I don't know how you do it. Let's talk to a psychiatrist. John, what do you do?
No, one thing which I was, Josephine, before you spoke, I was about to come to a point. The point I was bringing back us to is what Don, in his opening statement, he shared. I think it's not either or. What Brad is saying makes sense. What you are saying makes sense. Somewhere down the line, we have to educate all of us, especially young kids, because somewhere down the line, with the access to internet and the access, there is a lack of morality in all of us. And what happens is, at least those of us, like Don says, right, we can use our imagination, to do certain things. But young kids, 18 years, 17 years, 21 years, they might not have that ability, or they might not think in that way. And they channelize their hate, their despair, their, lack of self-respect in this ghastly manner. So while we do all the other things which all of us know and are aware of, like gun control, more, beefed up security, use of new technology, we cannot ignore education, because that is what I think will in the long term help to reduce this. I don't know whether it will stop it completely, but we have to come up with a newer way of thinking.
But listen to what you're saying, right? I agree with you. Our priests are pedophiles, right? Our, the Christian leadership is only after money. Our teachers are having sex with the students. Our politicians are immoral, right? I mean, who are the bearers of morality now? And what is that message being sent to the young? I mean, we're all of a certain age on this call. We grew up with people who we admired. And then I think in the past 20 years or so, we've just seen all of these institutions, from a moral perspective, crumble. So I put the question: who is the moral character these days?
Don.
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. I agree. All I can tell you from personal experience is that I don't have a priest, number one. As far as my minister was concerned, I never gave the church a dime. As for teachers having students, that never happened to me, no matter how hard I tried. So I think much of what we have here is very general, because there are plenty who are make an effort to be as moral as they possibly can be in those ranks and professions.
Isn't what we have more information, though? Evidently, priests have been pedophiles, at least from what's coming out now, for 15 or 20 years, and people who are adults are coming out. So this stuff was going on. It wasn't talked about. There have always been teachers who fooled around inappropriately, but there are an awful lot of good teachers, and there are an awful lot of good priests. And it's the way that it's been focused on now.
Mhm.
And I think I think it's good. It needs to be cleaned up, but it sure shakes your faith. I mean, I still have teachers that I think about. I was talking with Don the other day about how important good teachers are in your background. And, you know, you have to, it's what do you look at? You look at all the people who lose their position, or you look at the ones who are really good and really influenced you in a positive way. So I agree that, you know, reading the papers, if I were a kid, I wouldn't trust anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I go along with Josephine on a big piece of all of what she just said, and that is how venal are we by nature that 15 or 20 years has been going on in the Catholic Church for 50 years, and it was swept under the carpet. The priests were moved from one parish to another. It was egregious negligence. And what changed it? When I say we're a venal culture, what changed it, what corrected that behavior is a few multi-million-dollar libel suits against the church. And that woke everything up. Money was the answer to that problem.
So coming back to, Don again in his opening statement, he did share about what happened to the Indians here, right? The natives here. So of course there were a lot of ghastly acts that were done at that time, you know, when the early Europeans came here, and they didn't do something that they were not already. Sorry, they didn't do. I muted a couple of folks because there was a lot of background noise coming, so you can unmute yourself if you want to speak. So there were a lot of ghastly acts done there and all across the world. So it's not that crimes and such acts against humanity is something new. It's just that the easy access to such weapons which can very easily create a bigger number of people, impact a bigger number of people. That is number one. And number two, the decreasing morality in the society. And it's not that all of us are highly moral. It's just that we are a little bit better than those who are doing these crimes. We are not little bit, much better than, but there is a general lack of morality in the society, and a lot of blaming others rather than looking within. That's what I think.
I don't, I think I'm sort of hearing that we've degenerating, or the society is degenerating, based on the news reports that's coming on. I'm not sure that I agree with that, or agree with just being on that. I think a lot of stuff is becoming public. I think the example of the priests, I still think the majority of priests are probably pretty good. I think the majority of teachers, I'm guessing, are probably pretty good as well. There is a lot of sensationalist stuff, and because I think the ease at which information can be communicated by a relatively few people, and the human desire to consume sensationalistic stuff, appears that things are far, far worse. But I'm not convinced that they are far, far worse. I still think that the moral character is that's likely still there. And I think this sort of gets in the idea of, if you can learn from the past, then you can predict the future. I think part of this is it's very difficult to learn from the past. Josephine looks at the evidence and says, we're going to hell in a handbasket. And I'm looking at the evidence and I'm, saying that, wow, we've got a lot of very advanced media that's surfacing a lot of stuff, but the real nature of, the human condition isn't really changed substantially. And I don't know how to resolve that, that difference. I'm sure the truth is probably somewhere in between, although probably closer to my view.
Avi has just raised a very important point, and that's the M word. What's different, really, is the media in this country, the speed of it, and the magnification of it. The media nowadays can take a human hair and make it look like a tree. And you've got 300 television cable channels, you've got the internet tweeting, you've got all of this stuff. It's a far cry from when we in this room in this call were all children, and we had 3 television networks and 4 or 5 radio stations in a town, and maybe 1 or 2 daily papers. We had to wait. Now, boom. And I think it makes everything look 10 times as large as it is.
Well, I think I want to go back to the question. Sorry, Marilyn. It's just that it's not that I think the world is going to hell in a handbasket. I think we are in hell already in this handbasket. We're in hell. We're not going anymore. So the question that I was responding to was, what's in the minds of these young people? And I was just, had to ascertain that I'm not sure where they're gathering their examples of moral fiber or moral character, how to be a good individual, since the examples which are so popularized are so negative. So if I were a young person now, like 13 or 14, who am I holding up in high esteem? And I was just calling out a few examples, and there were many, many more examples. We've even killed our God, So I don't know what young people are grasping these days, or how are they learning to be good people? Who are their examples of good people?
Well, I think the media is at the heart of a lot of this. When we just watched the setup that they had for the debate this past week, one of the things that really was impressed upon me is the way they set up the questions and the way that they had to be answered. I understand the time constraint, but they had to be answered in black and white. And maybe because of that time constraint, a lot of things came out negatively or were broadcasted as, being bad. But when Marilyn brought up Rosa DeLauro's answer to the media that was questioning her, I think that was a very good way of handling it, because the person who was questioning her did not get the negative answer he was hoping to concerning the politics in the situation. So I think that one of the things that came out of these questions this past week at the debates was, why do you have to answer the questions that are put to you by the media? And I understand these people are on the hot seat and everybody's waiting for a response. But as Rosa DeLauro pointed out, you don't have to answer the question.
This is sort of, when did you stop beating your wife?
Right. Exactly.
Well, I think there's a mental health avenues. I'm not sure what you do with this skinheads and people who aren't doing very well themselves, and the only avenue they see is to blame somebody and to kill somebody because they're not doing well, or their family or their community, which seems to me at the heart of a lot of this white supremacist stuff that's going around, and it seems to me so toxic. If your whole group that you identify spouts that kind of hate, what can a community do to intervene and to say, maybe you can look at it another way, or maybe there's another, they have groups that try to bring together warring factions. We knew someone who tried to get a basketball team when Ireland was at odds with the oranges and the greens, try to get the kids together to play basketball and get to know these people that they supposedly ought to hate. But it seems like such a small drop in the bucket for the huge problem. I guess you have to start small. I don't know. That often is very effective to get people who are on the other sides to talk and to have ground rules where you can't just name call.
So this is one thing that you said, Marilyn, that makes more sense. So mental health, I think that is where, as a society, at least in America, it is much far ahead compared to other places like back in India, where we don't have as much focus on mental health issues. But of course, anybody who is in a good state of mind or in a fair state of mind will never use violence to the extent that some of these crazy people use. The question is, how do we handle it? Now when we read these news nowadays, I think what is the two things are happening. One is there is no safe place in the world anymore. That is crazy. Like, and the number two, as Brad was saying earlier, the media, it makes it like there is so much repetition of it. Uh, that we have become numb to it. I remember back in, when 9/11 happened, the entire world, even in back in India, we were hooked to the TV for 2-3 days continuously. And then now, if there is any terrorist activity happens, we just read it as just the next thing that happened. Or now it has happened with gun violence in America. It's just, okay, one more thing, nothing new. It has happened earlier. And that is where I think, where Josephine, what she said earlier makes more sense, is because these things happen at such an alarming rate, the society is becoming numb. So we have to, go back to probably the politicians and encourage them to do some real research on this, so that in a bipartisan manner we can figure out what exactly is the root cause, what are the different action items we can do, uh, and then take a decision. Because unless and until somebody studies the individuals who do it, find out what is their motivation, find out what are their modus operandi, and then only we can figure out. Otherwise, I think the more we go ahead, right, my fear is it will happen even more because of the way the society is going. Just one last thing is, I went to the park with my kids yesterday, and there are these like 7 teenagers in the park there, and they were all sitting next to each other, and all of them were watching their own phone. So, and I walked for 1 hour, and I saw all of them hooked to their own phone and sitting next to each other in a park. So where is the society going?
I'll tell you where it's not going. It's not going to church anymore as a family. And families aren't doing very much more as families. Families are disintegrating. Families are becoming more isolated. Therein lies a huge problem. You talk about the moral fiber, and where are the moral leaders, if there are any anymore? I doubtful that there aren't that many. You can find them if you look hard enough. There was a time in our country where you didn't have to look that hard to find them. But there's that going on nowadays too. Now, unfortunately, and this is something I was saying at the outset of this conversation, this terrible tragedy in Texas is now, you watch, it's already started, it's going to cause half of this country to erupt and exploit it for political purposes. And the other half of this country will be on the defensive about the political exploitation of this, which is horrible. It doesn't do anything for the 29 lives that are lost. It doesn't do anything for the next large-scale amount of lives that are going to be lost. And that's, I think, one of the larger problems that we have here, is that the real tragedy gets lost in the muck of all of that cultural stuff. And I'm not looking forward to any of that. I'll be here, and you will be hearing it. You'll be hearing it in the social media ad infinitum.
We say
I think I also agree with Brad, and is the exact same situation in India as well, where any event or any accident or any tragedy is always politicized. And with the social media, what has happened is there are a lot of people who are like trolls in the social media. They really don't understand the entire issue, but because they have taken a particular side, so they will just keep supporting that side irrespective of the logic. So the logic has like there's no place of logic in the world now. it's like you've already decided the side, and then you just keep repeating that again and again. And, that's what is going on everywhere. It's in US, it's in India, it's the same thing.
We had a former presidential advisor who famously said, "Never waste a good tragedy." That's a direct quote. And that tells you how blind and deaf and dumb some are, and how one note they are. And if that's what you take away from something like this, then you are beneath contempt, and you are at the root of the problem.
I don't know if that's what they're doing. By politicizing, I think we need to raise it to that level. I think, why isn't the president talking about how to fix it? What is he doing? Thoughts and prayers. So you might say it's political. I'm saying, someone has to raise this as a problem. When are we going to raise this as a problem and do something? That's what I think. People, you're calling it politicizing it. I'm calling it as raising it. We have to finally raise it as an issue.
Yes.
We discussed the Hawaiian incident. We discussed the story, and when people were challenged with the idea that they had seconds or minutes to live, the main thing they did was to bargain, willing to give up everything and say, please do anything to prevent this. They got involved with prevention. And they were willing, they weren't thinking about money anymore, about the usual things people think about. And it lasted for 38 minutes. But at the end of that time, we went right back. So the question comes up is, why is it that no one, and this is a position that you can disagree with me, but I think it's true, that no one has a sensible plan to prevent the pushing of the button or the major issue. We're talking about the death of 20 or 30 people. We're talking now about the death of humanity. We're talking about an incident that there is no second chance. All the things we're talking about, we're so used to, there's a war and then there's a cure. But we're talking about a new reality that Einstein is telling us that's different than we've ever had before, where the next war is the end of everything. There is no recovery when we unleash all of these bombs en masse. We did it once or twice in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and hopefully we can learn from that. But apparently we haven't learned from it. We learned for a little while, you see. We had a nuclear arms treaty to reduce them, and now we're getting rid of all those treaties and we're going back to the old way of doing things. So the issue is, why is it that we are stuck in this way of thinking, that we get caught up as we are in this meeting of this either or? We've had some word switches, and we come back to, well, maybe we could substitute both and for either or. But we do get caught up ourselves in the right or wrong, instead of asking the question, what can we do to make things better? How can we put our energies together to make things better? And it's so easy to fall back into who's right and who's wrong and so on. But I think that's part of it, because we don't realize how addicted we are. So I'd like to go back, if I might, just to introduce our history, because I think it tells us something. If we understand our true story, our evolution, we really can prevent things. If we understand the nature of the order of things, then we can devise a way, if we understand the future, to prevent it. But if you look at animals, we started off with animals, and animals had no language, they had no words. And yet they had to solve problems. They had to get enough food. Their main job was to reproduce and produce their own kind. And the way we did it years ago was we produced enough, we procreated enough that we could eat, each species could eat other species. We basically were cannibals. There weren't enough food. So the way we survived was by having larger numbers, having bigger tribes. And then we realized that you had to have a big tribe in order to win. So we learned to become tribal, we become part of our DNA. So whether it's a feminine, masculine tribe, or the Christian or Jewish tribe, or whether it's the Russian or American tribe, the fact is that we are biologically wired to be tribal. That's the way we are. And it was absolutely normal and sane to be part of a tribe, to gather in large numbers because we could overwhelm other tribes. And the normal way of thinking was fight or flight. So we're biologically addicted to fight or flight. And then what happened in the course of evolution, we developed a cortex, which we've called a Genie organ. We've called it a Genie organ. The cortex is interesting because it has the ability to solve problems. It has the ability to create language. So when our early ancestors created language, what language did they create? Think about it. We created political words, we created patriotic words, and then we created religious words. We were superstitious. How did we explain things? So we didn't have the ability to tell accurate stories. We created stories of gods that are jealous and multiple gods, hundreds of gods, thousands of gods, and stories about their gods. So then we created words in our language, and the words support our tribal way of thinking. So we have developed a language that causes us to divide the world into us and them, good or bad, right or wrong, fight or flight. And that's what I think as Einstein is telling us. The way we've been thinking and are still thinking up to now is tribal thinking. We don't have words in our language. So we're still caught up with right and wrong, good or bad, either or. And by simply introducing a few new words, we've talked about the 7 words we started our meetings with. And we stopped doing as much blaming. We're still doing a fair amount of blaming. Instead of getting to one of the new words, when we talk about the choices we have, and there's the mental freedom control pattern, one of the choices, we can say, what works for my tribe and your tribe for now and the future? But instead of doing that, you say, well, what's good for me and my family and my tribe? We're so caught up in that. So now it seems to me that what Einstein is telling us, the words we've created cause us to think in terms of either or, and we have to invent new language and teach ourselves new language, and that's the answer. So I'm just offering that. I'm saying this because I've already sent you yesterday a set of new words, new language, which I hope you will look at. Because I think if we teach ourselves less than 100 new words, we can change our way of thinking. But it's very simple. We said that there are 3 things that evolution teaches us that whoever created us, the first cell had 3 qualities to it. One was to multiply, to procreate, to reproduce. The second quality was to differentiate, to become a different variety. First, we started by mitosis. We created the identical individual. Then we had variation, so we created families. But then the third quality, which we see in the human body, is we direct our energy, every of the 50 trillion cells or whatever the exact number is, directs its energy for the benefit of the whole. So that third quality is that we were given the innate quality to direct our creative energy for the benefit of the larger system. Now, if we were to invent a word for that, what is the word that we would create? If an animal or an early ancestor to say, what is the word we would use to say, when you direct your energy for the benefit of the greater whole, what would we call that? What word would we use? And I suggest we use the word unconditional love, unconditional global love. Love is the direction of our energy for the benefit of the greater whole. We don't practice unconditional love. We practice tribal love. We're still caught up in our tribal way of thinking. And so I just ask you, look over the essay that I sent, because it does describe, that's in the second one I'll be sending today, it describes our history, a short version of our evolutionary history. And if we learn something about from where we've come from to where we are today, we'll begin to get an understanding of what we need to go to tomorrow. And what makes us different than every other creature is that we have the ability to take responsibility for who we are and what we want to become. That's what makes us different. We have the ability to tell an accurate story of where we've come from. And if we do that, we can project that trajectory to the future and prevent. So we have the ability of prevention, but we have to get our heads and our idea together. John Kennedy came up with an idea that people thought was crazy. Remember his idea? He said, we can go to the moon. Now, could you imagine a primitive person or an animal saying we can go to the moon? John Kennedy said we can go to the moon. And people said, you're crazy. No one can go to the moon. We don't know how to do that. But what happened is we got our heads together. So there are over 1 million parts in a missile that will take a human being to the moon. Now, not one person could create 100 million parts, but you see, working together in harmony, synergistically, we can create 1 million parts. We've done it, not once, but many times. And now we're talking about going to different moons and different worlds and different areas. When Einstein tried to create a light bulb, he couldn't do it alone, but people sent him 3,000 different substances, and he tried all of them. And somebody said to Edison, how could you keep going when you failed 3,000 times? And he said, I didn't fail 3,000 times. He said, I found 3,000 things that you couldn't make a light bulb with. And then somebody sent me tungsten, and that worked. And so you see, the message, I think, is when we work together like we're doing in these meetings, when we bring our genius together, that is the answer. We can find a solution, but we can't find it if we keep blaming people. We can't find it if we just think that we can do it alone. We really need to look at ourselves and first change our way of thinking. And I don't think we can do that with the language that we have. So that's what I basically said in this paper that I've sent you. I know it's more than 1 page long, and I know it's more than 30 seconds or 3 minutes to read it. But unfortunately, I don't know there's any way we can give you an instance, say Shazam, or Hallelujah, or God, as we did, pray to God at the last minute and say, please stop this, God, because God is telling us, I gave you one more chance. This was a false alarm, but now it's up to you. Don't count on me that I'm going to keep coming back to you and tell you that I'm going to do it for you. I've already given you this special brain that you call the cerebral cortex, which only describes its location in the brain, doesn't tell you anything. But you've named it now the Genie organ, which is an organ that tells you it has the ability to grant your wishes if you only free it from your past. That's what your Genie organ is. I've already given you the basis, but you have to get together and put your minds together and your genius together. And that's what I think Barbara Marx Hubbard in her brilliance was telling us. Until we can get together and co-create our genius together, that's exactly what we're doing. And as far as I can tell, no one else is doing this. We're beginning to do it. We've just developed this technology where we can bring people together in this marvelous technology. And Zoom has given us 50 opportunities to start other groups like us. And they've told us that if they like what we're doing, they'll do more. So it seems to me that one of the answers, we've got to find a way to bring our genius together. And we're doing that now. I think we've come a long way. If you go back and look at our early recordings, you'll see we spend a lot of time blaming Trump and blaming each other and politics and the other countries and so on. And if you look at the meetings today, we spend a lot more time asking the question, what can we do to make things better? That's a different way of thinking than there's a right and wrong, who's right and who's wrong. So that's my speech. I'm sorry to say. I hope I don't annoy too many people by usurping or using my privilege as a coordinator. But as I've said, if somebody else feels they'd better do a better job or want to do it, I'll be happy to turn over the chairmanship and give you longer times to talk. But so far, I'm still holding the talking stick and offering these ideas. And I'd urge you to read the to take the time to read the 6 pages, which my wife tells me I've made into too small print, that if I made a larger print, it would be 12 pages, and then you'd really be frustrated. So I am trying to make this shorter, but I don't know how to do it, unfortunately. So we have any final comments before we end our meeting? And then we'll go into our business group. And we've said we're going to extend our meetings because an hour really isn't enough. Most meetings are an hour. I see other people who have meetings usually run an hour and a half or even 2 hours. And when I was doing my groups with drug users, we ran 36-hour meetings. We had all-night meetings, and they were very productive, because when people begin to get a little bit looser and begin to speak more candidly, you learn a lot more in 36 hours than 20 meetings in 15 minutes. But that's a different story here.
Unless if you're a drug user, they just seem shorter.
Any other comments before we end our meeting, go to our business meeting?
Well, I want to offer, Brad sometimes has suggestions on movies to see. What you said here that when you started this morning, there's this movie called The Green Beautiful. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a French film, so you have to watch it in subtitles unless you speak French.
The Green Book?
It's all these planets come together. The Green Beautiful. All these planets, people come together and they're like, things are not going so good on Earth. We have to send a delegation down to Earth. They're like, oh, no, not Earth. Don't want to go. Don't want to go. But then this group of people goes down to Earth, and you will see that just through changing the semantics of the waters, they're able to anyway, I kind of recommend it. Behind failsafe, check out The Green Beautiful too.
The Green Beautiful 2.
I already found it. I'll share with the group. La Belle Verte is the name of the movie.
Thank you for that suggestion. Any other final comments before we go into our business meeting?
Let's see. I'm not. I think one of the things I struggle with a little bit is how to make some of this concrete. And maybe it's a little bit more to take on things, but one of the things that Josephine's doing is she's bringing very specific examples on things that can be done. And to me, that sounds like that is progress. And I'm not sure if that's not, if thinking that's not working together, blaming others, or that really is the path towards, that is how you work together. That is how you sort of co-create. That you do have a definitive opinion. You say that this is something that works good for everybody. So when she makes something specific and something that, this is how I think things can get better, is that what we're talking about, or is that not what we're talking about? And that's what I'm a little bit confused by. Is that the path forward, or is that's not the path forward, or it's just ambiguous? It's maybe not something we're going to pick up at the end of the meeting, but I'm kind of left from a concrete perspective. Is that, if a word switch would fix that, or that is what that is what we're talking about, that having something specific like that. I'll leave that as a rhetorical question for this point, but I'm sort of scratching my head thinking that, in your view of the word, is that constructive or is that not constructive? The definitive suggestion that, if we need stronger gun control, and that is the constructive way of doing it, or that's not.
Well, I will comment on that before we end the meeting. I think it's a both ends situation again. Yes, it is the specific things. If we have 1 million people doing different things, there are many things that need to be done. If you look at the human body, there have many different cells. And when the liver cell does what it does, and when the kidney cell and the brain cell and the heart cell and the anus cell, they all do their specific things, the whole system works. But you have to have the whole system working together. So it's not just one person dealing with gun control, or one person dealing with pollution, or one person dealing with starvation, or whatever. It's global warming. It's all of these things, but one person can't do it. If we get a lot, maybe 1 million people working on each of their what each of the individual has to do. Some people here are better. I mean, Brad is very good with his voice, and other people are very good with some other aspect, maybe the conceptual thinking. Somebody else is good with technology. Somebody else is good with it's when we bring all of these different things together. So it's at both ends. We do the internet. So we got to do the specific, but it's a both end situation. They're not, but we keep thinking in either or. It's not an either or situation. It's synchronicity. It's bringing ourselves. It's not a winner or loser. It's not the right way or the wrong way. It's getting all of these things together and asking, what's the way that gets us what we want, and what can each of us contribute? What is it that you can contribute? What is it can I can contribute? And if we all contribute what we have available to us in a way that works together as the human body works together, then it's fine. But if just one part of ourselves, if the kidney stops functioning, or the bladder stops functioning, then the whole system cannot survive. That's what I think we're learning now. And but it takes a lot to learn this, because what we've inherited when we're born, we've inherited an animal brain, and the animal brain is prepared to work at birth. The Genie organ is not prepared at all. All the Genie organ do is learn what it's taught. And if we teach the Genie organ from the time it's taught that your way is the only right way, and if some people disagree with you, you should cut their heads off, that becomes normal. If that's what you're taught, then the Genie organ's normal way of thinking. What Einstein is saying is that way of thinking that we've been taught to do what you've been told is what's getting us into trouble. And now there are a number of people of the 7 billion people, they're maybe in the minority, but there are a number of people who've come up with a much higher level of functioning. They have discovered moral, spiritual reality. They've discovered the importance of love is more important than money. The first symbols we created, when we created symbols, were the symbols of power, which is money. Money is a symbol of power. But we're just now learning to create the symbol of not just tribal love. Tribal love is the kind of love, you see, that gets us into trouble. Tribal love says, be ready to kill for your tribe. Whether it's a political tribe or a patriotic tribe or your religious tribe, tribal love teaches us to kill for your tribe, or maybe if not to kill in a civilized world, at least to put others down to compete for limited resources. So we've got to get over that. We've got to get over that way of thinking, but we're all in that comfort zone. As you say frequently, I'm not sure I'm ready to give up, put the larger system. I mean, if it's between my family and what's good for my neighbor, it's going to be my family first. Well, but it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and. If we only deal with ourselves, then the whole system will fall apart. That's the idea. But if we deal with ourselves first and the other tribe, and we do it both in synchrony, that's the way we can make progress forward. So that's my sort of speech, and you can beat me up for exceeding my time.
Okay.
Thank you all for
Thanks. Bye all.
For joining us and for participating, and we'll continue with our business meeting, and we'll stop the recording.